Washington should redeploy nukes to South Korea, Bolton. The United States housed nuclear weapons in the East Asian nation between 1958 and 1991. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton has called for the U.S. to redeploy nuclear weapons to South Korea, a move which he said would help protect the security of Washington's key Asian ally. Having tactical nuclear weapons back on the peninsula would be clear evidence of our resolve and determination to deter North Korea, Bolton told Reuters on the sidelines of a forum at the ASEAN Institute for Policy Studies in Seoul on Tuesday. Bolton has cultivated a reputation for hawkish foreign policy stances throughout a decades-long career in Washington. Bolton's comments came as South Korean President Yoon Suk traveled to Washington on Monday ahead of a summit with President Joe Biden, where the topic of the United States' extended deterrence of North Korea's nuclear program is expected to be tabled. Pyongyang has conducted a series of ballistic missile tests in recent months, with launches on March 14 perceived by Washington and Seoul as a protest against the announcement of the largest joint military drills undertaken by the two allies in 5 years, just days prior. North Korea has insisted that its weapons testing program is defensive in nature, and necessary in the face of U.S. threats. In March, some members of Yoon's Conservative People Power Party called for Seoul to develop its own nuclear weapons program, in spite of potential international repercussions for violating a nuclear non-proliferation treaty. According to Bolton, the U.S. placing armaments in South Korea would provide everyone with some breathing room. Redeploying the tactical nuclear weapons does not preclude South Korea from getting its own capability, Bolton explained. But it may give us some time to think about whether we really want to do that. Bolton added that a structure of collective self-defense in East Asia and the Indo-Pacific could be a solution to regional disputes. The more people can look at their mutual interests not simply on the nuclear side but against the threat of states like China and South Korea, the safer we all are, he claimed. Ahead of his successful election campaign in 2022, Yoon had signaled that he would consider asking Washington to place nuclear weapons in the country. He has since distanced himself from those remarks, while his defense minister, Lee Jong-sup, has said that no such plans are in place. Pyongyang, meanwhile, has condemned the irresponsible actions of the United States and South Korea, which its foreign ministry said last month was increasing the risk of nuclear war on the Korean peninsula. The U.S. stationed nuclear weapons in South Korea in 1958 but withdrew them in 1991. UN chief welcomes relocation of UN staff in Sudan. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres on Monday welcomed the safe temporary relocation of hundreds of UN staff members and dependents from Khartoum and other places in Sudan. Guterres appreciated the cooperation by all sides in Sudan to allow for the operation to be carried out without incident. He reiterated his call on the parties to immediately cease hostilities and allow all civilians to evacuate from areas affected by the fighting, said Farhan Haq, deputy spokesman for the UN chief, in a statement. The world body has about 4,000 staff in Sudan, of which 800 are international. Deadly armed clashes broke out between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Forces on April 15, killing more than 424 people, with about 3,730 wounded by Saturday, according to the country's health ministry. Lavrov and Guterres touch on Ukraine, Mideast and grain deal at UNSC meeting. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov discussed, at a meeting with UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, the situation in Ukraine, Syria, Yemen, and Afghanistan, as well as cooperation between Russia and the UN and the implementation of the Black Sea grain deal. The Russian Foreign Ministry has detailed. Lavrov arrived at the UN headquarters on Monday, where he presides over Security Council meetings. He met with Guterres, who took note of Moscow's concerns about how the Russian part of the grain deal is being implemented. Following a meeting with the UN Secretary-General, Lavrov told reporters he had received a letter from the head of the global organization with ideas for the full implementation of the deal. Guterres, as reported by the UN, informed the Russian minister about the organization's efforts to resolve the situation with the host country, including visa issues. There was a substantive discussion of various aspects of cooperation between Russia and the global organization, the ministry said. The focus of the discussion was the situation in Ukraine and around it. The minister reiterated in detail the root causes of the current crisis, the course and goals of the special military operation aimed at eliminating threats to Russia's national security. He severely criticized the behavior of Western states that use the UN platform to promote politicized anti-Russian initiatives that are only fraught with prolonging the current crisis, the release outlined. Lavrov noted the U.S. failure to fulfill its obligations, including the refusal to issue visas to Russian representatives for events held under UN auspices, illegal alienation of Russian diplomatic property and imposition of restrictions on the movement of Russian diplomats. A detailed exchange of views took place on a number of urgent issues under consideration by the UN Security Council, such as the situation in Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan, as well as in the Palestinian-Israeli settlement, the statement noted. Lavrov and Guterres agreed on the indispensable nature of the constructive interaction of all members of the Council in order to overcome these and other crisis situations. It said the sides paid attention to implementation of the Istanbul Agreements of July 2022 on the export of Ukrainian food and ensuring unhindered access for Russian exports of agricultural products and fertilizers to the world market. Both sides noted the importance of further strengthening the central coordinating role of the UN in global politics and promoting true multilateralism based on fundamental international legal norms, including the goals and principles of the global organization's charter, the ministry said. The Black Sea Grain Initiative, signed between Russia, Turkey, Ukraine, and the United Nations amid the military conflict in Ukraine in July 2022, provides for exports of Ukrainian grain, food, and fertilizers over the Black Sea from 3 ports, including Odessa. The package agreement also includes a memorandum of understanding between Russia and the UN to unblock Russian grain and fertilizer exports via the Black Sea, which, according to Moscow, has not been implemented amid Western sanctions. In March, Russia extended the deal for 60 of possible 120 days. Ukraine risks losing Western support if counteroffensive fails, NYT. Territorial gains by Kiev are not necessarily likely despite arms and training from its allies, the newspaper has claimed. Ukraine is far from guaranteed to succeed in a counteroffensive against Russia despite receiving Western weapons, training, and intelligence support, the New York Times has stated. An underwhelming outcome would likely prompt Kiev's backers to press it to negotiate for peace, the newspaper predicted. Kiev has long touted an upcoming push as the next decisive phase of the conflict with Russia. The NYT claimed on Monday that the offensive could be launched as early as May, although Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal recently assessed that it might not get underway until the summer. According to classified documents shared as part of the Pentagon leaks, Ukraine is planning to use 12 combat brigades of about 4,000 troops each in its renewed campaign against Russian forces. The US and its allies have helped train 9 of those units, with soldiers being taught to use Western-provided equipment and receiving tactical advice at American military facilities in Germany. Ukraine's partners are also expected to provide it with intelligence for the proposed assault. Everything hinges on this counteroffensive, Alexander Vershbo, a former U.S. ambassador to Russia and senior NATO official, said of the future operation. Everybody's hopeful, maybe over-optimistic. But it will determine whether there is going to be a decent outcome for the Ukrainians. Kiev has ruled out negotiations with Moscow until it recaptures all the territories that it claims as its own. However, even with all Western help, big gains are not guaranteed, or even necessarily likely, the NYT warned. The newspaper cited Ukrainian battlefield losses, heavy expenditure of munitions, and Russian troops digging in and preventing the enemy from using Western-taught warfare as working against Kiev. After the push is over, there is little chance that the West can recreate the buildup for the foreseeable future, the report argued. The US and its allies have largely exhausted their military inventories after flooding Kiev with military aid, causing gaps that are unlikely to be filled until next year, experts assessed. Meanwhile, Russia is ramping up pressure against Ukraine despite previous setbacks, meaning that the window to make significant gains may not remain open indefinitely, the NYT stated. With larger reserves at its disposal, Moscow could emerge victorious in the conflict, it acknowledged. Politico previously reported that the White House was bracing itself to mitigate the fallout from a potentially poorly executed Ukrainian counteroffensive. A temporary truce could give Kiev time for a military buildup before another offensive at a later point, U.S. officials claimed to the outlet. US-backed Venezuelan opposition figure expelled by neighbor. Politician Juan Guaido entered Colombia in an irregular manner, the authorities said. Colombia has expelled US-backed Venezuelan opposition figure Juan Guaido, who had attempted to attend an international conference in Bogotá. The critic of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro had earlier crossed into Colombia from his home country in defiance of a court-imposed travel ban. The Colombian Foreign Ministry said on Tuesday that Guaido had arrived in an irregular manner. It added that immigration officials had taken the politician to El Dorado International Airport in Bogotá so he could board a US-bound plane. Guaido confirmed that he had been forced to leave for the US and condemned the way that Colombian authorities had treated him. Because of the direct threats to my family and my daughters from the Maduro regime, which have spread to Colombia, I am taking this flight, he wrote on Twitter, promising to continue to fight. The former legislator had hoped to attend an international conference hosted by Colombian President Gustavo Petro on Tuesday. The summit is part of ongoing negotiations between the Maduro government and its opposition, which are being mediated by Norway. Colombian Foreign Minister Álvaro Leiva told reporters on Tuesday that Guaido had not been invited to the summit. Colombia had openly backed Guaido under conservative President Iván Duque. However, Petro, a left-winger who was elected to succeed Duque last year, distanced himself from Guaido in favor of seeking negotiations with Venezuelan political leaders. Guaido was declared interim president in early 2019 by the National Assembly, Venezuela's parliament, which was controlled by the opposition at the time. The move came after the opposition and the U.S. accused Maduro of rigging the 2018 election in order to secure a second term in office. The U.S. had quickly recognized Guaido as the legitimate leader of Venezuela, and the EU and several South American states did the same. Meanwhile, countries such as Russia, China, and Iran continued to consider Maduro as the rightful president. Maduro slammed Guaido's actions as illegal and accused Washington of attempting to orchestrate a coup against him. In December 2022, a coalition of Venezuela's opposition parties voted to dissolve the Guaido-led interim government and form a committee to oversee the 2024 presidential election. Guaido criticized the decision as a jump into the abyss. White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said in January that, despite Guaido's dismissal, the U.S. was continuing to coordinate with him and other like-minded members of the opposition in Venezuela. Netherlands shutters embassy in Sudan amid mass evac operations. The Netherlands has closed its embassy in Khartoum, the capital of Sudan. Diplomats will continue to work remotely, the Dutch Foreign Ministry said. The embassy of the Netherlands in Khartoum is closed. Work will continue as possible from the region and the Netherlands, the ministry said in a statement on its website. Dutch Foreign Minister Wopke Hoekstra said Monday 60 Dutch nationals had been evacuated from Sudan. Earlier, the Netherlands sent a few military aircraft to Jordan, so that later they could evacuate people from Sudan. The Netherlands and various other countries, including Germany, Greece, France, and Spain, have been evacuating their nationals and diplomats from Sudan due to the tense security situation in the country. On April 15, violent clashes between the Sudanese Regular Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, paramilitary group broke out, with the epicenter in Khartoum. government forces accused the RSF of mutiny and launched airstrikes against their bases. Abdel Fattah Burhan, the head of the Sudanese military, issued a decree disbanding the RSF. The sides agreed to a 3-day truce starting Friday in connection with the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Fitr. So far, around 600 people have died in the clashes, the Sudanese Health Ministry said last week. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization reported over 400 deaths and said more than 3,500 people had been injured. Earlier Monday, the Egyptian Foreign Ministry confirmed that Mohammed al-Gharawi, who served as the assistant of Egypt's administrative attaché in Sudan, was killed in Khartoum. The Sudanese armed forces had initially reported that al-Gharawi had been killed by RSF officials before the ministry had temporarily denied his death. Kiev's recent strikes on humanitarian corridor threaten extension of grain initiative. Ukraine attacked bases of Russia's Black Sea Fleet and civilian infrastructure in Crimea on March 23 and on April 24 using humanitarian corridors that are used for exports of Ukrainian agricultural products, the Russian Defense Ministry said on Monday. If such efforts continue, it will severely jeopardize any deal extension. The ministry recalled that Russia suspended participation in the Black Sea Grain Initiative after Ukraine's similar attack in October 2022. Moscow then returned to the grain deal after Kiev agreed not to use the humanitarian corridor and Ukrainian ports for combat operations. On March 23 and April 24, 2023, in violation of these guarantees, Ukraine launched repeated attacks on the Black Sea Fleet's base in Sevastopol and the civilian infrastructure of Crimea by unmanned surface vessels, the ministry said in a statement. According to the ministry, vessels came from the port of Odessa, designated for the implementation of the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Their deployment was carried out in the area of the humanitarian corridor, which is also involved in the export of agricultural products from the ports of Ukraine. Terrorist acts committed by the Kiev regime jeopardize the next extension of the grain deal after May 18, 2023, the ministry added. The latest comes as the Group of Seven has called for the grain initiative to be extended, just weeks after officials agreed to an earlier bid intended to prolong the arrangement in March. The unbrokered deal signed by Russia, Turkey, and Ukraine in July 2022 paved the way for Istanbul to resume grain exports through 3 Ukrainian ports, including in Odessa. The pact also includes an understanding between Russia and the UN to unblock the passage of Russian grain and fertilizer exports. Russia lists obstacles to moving UN from New York. Moscow would like to see the organization's HQ relocated to Switzerland or Austria. UN member states are against the idea of moving the organization's headquarters out of New York City mainly due to financial limitations, according to Peter Ilyachev, a high-ranking official at the Russian Foreign Ministry. Russia would, of course, like to relocate the UN HQ to some other more neutral spot, like Geneva or Vienna, but many member states don't want to leave New York, Ilyachev, who heads the Department of International Organizations at the ministry, said on Monday. According to the diplomat, there are a lot of reasons why national governments are reluctant to leave the largest city in the US, with one of them being that they have real estate there. It's hard for them to sustain 2 UN missions, so they have everything situated in New York. Those are more of the financial and economic reflections. Russia is thinking about moving the UN headquarters out of New York, where it has been located since the formation of the global body in 1951, he said. The Austrians and the Swiss are more neutral compared to the Americans, Ilyachev stated. Besides its New York-based headquarters, the UN also has offices in Geneva, Vienna, and Kenyan capital Nairobi. A Russian delegation headed by Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov had difficulties with obtaining U.S. visas to attend UN Security Council, UNSC, meetings in New York on Monday and Tuesday. The country's journalists were denied permits to enter the U.S. by the American authorities altogether, without any explanation. Lavrov argued that such behavior by the U.S. isn't worthy of a UN host nation. The Americans have just chickened out, he suggested, while promising that the move won't be left unanswered by Moscow. Russia, which currently holds the presidency of the UNSC, had planned some major newsbreak events in New York this week, and barring the pool of the country's reporters from participating was completely unacceptable, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said. When asked about the possibility of relocating the UN headquarters to another country on Monday, Kremlin Press Secretary Dmitry Peskov replied that it was an issue of additional thinking, additional analysts. Separatist Sikh leader arrested after a month on the run. Amritpal Singh has been transferred to a notorious high-security prison. Indian police have arrested Sikh separatist leader Amritpal Singh, after a month-long manhunt that involved up to 80,000 personnel. Singh, who heads the Waris Punjab political group which calls for an independent Khalistan on the border with Pakistan, was detained early on Sunday in a village in Punjab's Moga district. The manhunt began after an attack by Singh's followers on a police station in Amritsar, a holy city for the Sikhs in Punjab. The activists demanded the release of one of Singh's aides, Lovepreet Tufan. Singh was arrested at a Gurdwara, a Sikh shrine, in Road village, the hometown of slain Khalistani militant Jarnail Singh Bindranwale. He has been booked under the stringent 1980 National Security Act. Following his detention, Singh was flown to Dibrugarh in Upper Assam and placed in a notorious high-security prison which has not reported a single escape in its 170-year history. Police sources said Singh had been on the move for over a month and was shuttling between Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, and Delhi. He never stayed in one place for more than a few days to avoid capture and often disguised himself, according to CCTV footage. The separatist leader's new wife, Kirandeep Kaur, who is a UK-based non-resident Indian, was also arrested on April 20 while trying to board a London-bound flight at Sri Guru Ram Das International Airport in Amritsar. Singh is believed to have attempted to ensure Kaur's safe passage from India before fleeing and was allegedly routing funds to the UK prior to his own planned exit. He had worked in his family-owned transport business in Dubai between 2012 and 2021 and only returned home to support widespread protests against new farm laws. Indian authorities claimed that Singh had been trained in Georgia by Pakistan's intelligence unit, the ISI, before he returned to India. He was allegedly offered money by the ISI to revive militancy in Punjab, the aftershocks of which have since been felt in the UK, Canada, and Australia. Singh has made controversial statements in the past few months espousing the Khalistani cause and was allegedly radicalizing unemployed youth in Punjab. The region is home to terrorists who had assassinated former Punjab Chief Minister Beant Singh in 1995. 8 Chinese provinces report GDP growth rates over 5% in Q1. Provincial governments in China have recently released their first quarter gross domestic product, GDP, growth data. 8 out of 20 of them saw a year-on-year growth rate of over 5%. Jilin province led the pack with 8.2% economic expansion in the period, followed by Ningxia at 7.5% and Hainan at 6.8%. China's GDP grew by 4.5% year-on-year in the first 3 months of 2023, data from the National Bureau of Statistics, NBS, showed. The country's economic recovery has laid the foundation for its annual development objectives, according to Fu Linghui, spokesperson of the NBS. At least 20 provinces, including Guangdong, Shandong, and Zhejiang, have published their first quarter economic data as of Monday. 14 of them achieved a higher growth rate than the national average. The economic output of Guangdong province, which was just short of 3 trillion yuan, $434 billion, in the first quarter of 2022, has now surpassed that mark. Additionally, Shandong province has crossed the 2 trillion yuan threshold. Looking ahead, China's economic growth momentum is gradually strengthening, aided by effective macro policies, said Fu earlier this month. He added that the economy's growth rate in the second quarter is expected to accelerate significantly compared to the first quarter because of the low comparison base in the same period last year. Rec. number of participants at INNOPROM's Made in Russia stand tripled. The number of companies presented at the Made in Russia stand at the exhibition INNOPROM Soviet Central Asia in Tashkent has tripled in a year, Chief Executive of the Russian Export Center, REC, Veronika Nikishina said. Russian companies' interest in working in Uzbekistan and Soviet Central Asia markets increases amid the demand for developments of Made in Russia in the region. This is illustrated by the fact that last year 17 Russian companies took part in the exhibition, and this year their number has tripled. Last year there was only one stand, but now the display is so big that it has 4 locations, 3 of them are in halls, and 1 more is in the open air, Nikishina stated. Opened on April 24, the exhibition presents Russian producers of industrial and power engineering equipment, chemical and oil and gas industries. Moreover, domestic companies showed IT innovations, achievements in education and high-tech, power engineering, construction and other industries. The Made in Russia brand presents 5D printers, logistical robots, innovative construction supplies, smart pressure sensors, charge stations, interactive portable video studios and smart city projects. The companies represent the entire territory of Russia, from Irkutsk to St. Petersburg, from Moscow to Yoshkar-Ola. There are large companies as well as small and medium enterprises, Nikishina noticed. 59 Russian companies presented their products on the Made in Russia stand of the Russian Export Center at this year's exhibition INNOPROM Soviet Central Asia in Tashkent. First Republic Bank lost $100 billion in deposits during first quarter banking panic. First Republic Bank revealed it lost over $100 billion during the first quarter after bank failures spurred a domino effect of withdrawals from regional lenders and profits fell over 33%. First Republic's profits dropped to $269 million from $401 million last year, and revenue dropped 13%, or down to $1.2 billion, reports have noted. The loans the bank was pressured into taking out after the deposit run is also likely to keep future earnings lower. Though withdrawals are said to have stabilized, First Republic shares have lost 90% of their value since the banking crisis in March, which the bank is reportedly trying to make up by reducing its staff and slashing executive paychecks. It's also being reported that the bank is considering potentially selling off the bank or parts of it. Reports have noted that the company's shares fell 15% just after the release of its quarterly shortfalls. During a Monday earnings call, of which no questions were taken by bank execs, CEO Michael Roffler indicated that despite the setbacks, the bank has managed to maintain some 97% of its client relationships. First Republic drew massive attention after Silicon Valley Bank, SVB, and Signature Bank collapsed last month, jeopardizing the trust Americans have in U.S. regional banks and leading many customers to move millions of dollars in deposits to bigger institutions. China releases its first color-coded global map of Mars. China released its first color-coded global map of Mars on April 24, to coincide with the Space Day of China 2023. Its 76-meter spatial resolution provides better quality for conducting future Martian exploration projects and scientific research. The colored map images were jointly released by China National Space Administration, CNSA, and the Chinese Academy of Sciences, CAT, at a launch ceremony held in Hefei, East China's Anhui province. The colored images, along with scientific data obtained by the Tianwen-1 Mars mission, will be conducive to deepening our understanding of the Red Planet, according to CNSA. The medium-resolution camera of the orbiter of the Tianwen-1 mission carried out 284 orbital remote sensing imaging tasks from November 2021 to July 2022, providing coverage of the entire Martian surface. The ground application system processed 14,757 images to obtain the colored map images of the planet. This process has placed high demands for the orbital control, Zhang Rongqiao, chief designer for China's Mars exploration program, told CGTN in an interview on the sidelines of Space Day of China events. He is confident that the colors presented in the map are precise and true to the Red Planet. This full-color image of Mars not only provides a better quality base map for our country's follow-up Mars exploration projects and scientific research, but also for our international colleagues' Mars exploration projects and scientific research, Zhang said. I believe this is an important contribution Tianwen-1 made for deep space exploration, for all humankind, he added. Through these high-resolution images of Mars, researchers have identified a large number of geographic entities, 22 of which were named after historical and cultural villages and towns in China with a population of less than 100,000 by the International Astronomical Union based on relevant rules. About China's first Mars mission, Tianwen-1. China's Tianwen-1 Mars probe was launched back in July 2020 and entered Mars orbit in February 2021. The rover landed and started operations in May 2021. After it completed 90 Martian days of assigned scientific exploration tasks, the rover has continued its exploration on the Red Planet. The rover, which has traveled 1,921 meters in 358 Martian days, is now in sleep mode. As of June 29, 2022, the orbiter of the Tianwen-1 mission had realized global remote sensing exploration. It has been in operation for more than 1,000 days in good condition and will continue to carry out scientific exploration and accumulate original data in orbit, according to CNSA. For heaven's sake, 700-year-old angels appear in Norway's oldest cathedral during renovation. 2-meter-tall angel paintings, covered by a layer of lime plaster and concealed for centuries, were discovered by accident as specialists were working on restoring Norway's oldest cathedral. Could the Reformation have anything to do with these mysterious works of art having been hidden for so long? 2 medieval angel paintings were uncovered while work on renovating the Stavanger Cathedral in southern Norway was in progress. The paintings were hidden for several hundred years, tucked away several meters above ground, and were found by mere accident. These works of art were unearthed by bricklayers who checked whether the lime plaster on the ceiling was firmly fixed, yet they found out that it was hollow and loose. As they were slowly removing it, these 2-meter-tall medieval angels appeared. The paintings have conspicuously suffered from the ravages of time, but they are still largely decipherable. According to Anne Tittle, a painting conservator in the Archaeological Museum at the University of Stavanger, the paintings are 700 years old. One of the angels is swinging a censer. Other colors have been used as well, so we think both angels had robes on, Bettina Ebert, a cultural heritage researcher in the Archaeological Museum at the University of Stavanger, told local media, stressing the unique status of the object. Why the paintings have been covered up remains a mystery. However, Ebert, a professional cultural heritage researcher, cited 2 possible reasons. First, during the Reformation, angels, which were a common motif during the Middle Ages, were linked to Catholicism and thus seen as undesirable. Second, the paintings could have been damaged and had flaws. The Stavanger Cathedral, built in the 1100s, can seat as many as 800 people and is regarded as one of the leading historical sites in the southern part of the Nordic country. Adorned with sculptures of kings, it is Norway's oldest cathedral and the seat of the Bishop of Stavanger. Right now, it is undergoing massive renovation works in the lead-up to the church's and the city's 900th anniversary in 2025. Russia reveals fast and accurate breakthrough diagnostic method for cancer. Scientists from the National Research Tomsk Polytechnic University designed a radiopharmaceutical for an accurate prostate cancer diagnosis. The drug is based on the isotope of technetium-99m. According to the researchers, in addition to being cheaper than its counterparts, this medication is easier to manufacture, and makes it possible to treat more patients in a timely manner, the university press service stated. Cancer diagnosis and therapy through the use of radioisotopes is a relevant and crucial trajectory of medicine. Using radionuclides makes it possible to identify and kill cancer cells. Cancer diagnosis and treatment by way of radiopharmaceuticals, including a compound based on the isotope lutetium-177 PSMA used in Russia, involve selecting patients using positron emission tomography, PET. PET scanners are expensive and not widespread globally, the scientists explained. The more accessible and accurate the diagnosis, the more patients will be able to receive timely and effective treatment, the scientists emphasized. A group of scientists from the National Research Tomsk Polytechnic University sponsored by the Ministry of Education and Science Program Priority 2030 developed the radiopharmaceutical agent for the accurate diagnosis of prostate cancer, and it does not require any PET. According to the experts, the drug consists of the isotope, technetium-99m, and a specific protein molecule. The protein is susceptible to a prostate-specific membrane antigen, a membrane protein in prostate cancer cells. The protein identifies the enzyme in the body, and the isotope, as a siren light, points to the tumor, explained Roman Zelchin, D.Sc. Senior researcher, and top-level physician radiologist from the Nuclear Medicine Department within the Cancer Research Institute of Tomsk NRMC. This drug will make it possible to boost the availability of nuclear medicine to the Russian population, the scientists emphasized. According to them, its development is focused on being utilized in combination with a single photon emission computed tomography, and this technology is available in almost any city. The drug in the form of a solution is administered intravenously. In 2 hours, a tomography is performed. It accumulates quite intensively and specifically in a prostate primary tumor and its metastases. The drug formula is non-toxic and is excreted from the body within a few hours, Zelchin stated. This drug is much cheaper than its counterparts based on gallium and fluorine isotopes. In addition, it is easier to manufacture, which enables its mass production, the developers noted. According to the scientists, it could be in high demand in many Asian and African countries, where PET is not widespread. Phase I clinical trial has started in the Cancer Research Institute of Tomsk NRMC. According to specialists, the drug may be ready for clinical use by the end of 2023. National Research Tomsk Polytechnic University develops domestic drugs for cancer diagnosis and treatment under the sponsorship of the Ministry of Education and Science program dubbed Priority 2030 as part of the Healthy Engineering Strategic Project. Finland's military spending soars to Cold War levels as it joins NATO. The Nordic country's military expenditure has risen from 1.3% to 2% of its GDP within a matter of several years, underpinned by a number of costly purchases such as a new fleet of US-made F-35 jets. Having formally joined NATO earlier this month, Finland has recorded its highest year-on-year spike in defense spending since 1962, the height of the Cold War. Finland, which shares the longest border with Russia in Europe at 1,300 kilometers, recorded the most drastic spending boost in the EU, 36%, underpinned by a number of costly purchases, such as a new fleet of 64 F-35 fighter jets from U.S. weapons company Lockheed Martin. The €10 billion procurement was billed as the single largest splurge in the Nordic country's history. During the late Cold War era, Finland spent approximately 1.9% of its GDP on defense, yet saw its spending plummet in the subsequent years and reach its lowest in 2001 at 1.1% of GDP. Barely 2 years earlier, the defense expenditure still stood at a meager 1.3% of GDP. However, last year alone, Finland's outgoing five-party government led by the Social Democrats agreed to add more than €2 billion, $2.2 billion, in defense spending, citing hostilities in Ukraine as a pretext. In doing so, Finland notably eclipsed its fellow European nations, such as Lithuania, Sweden, and Poland, which saw the next biggest spikes in their defense budgets at 27%, 12%, and 11%, respectively. As a new-fledged NATO member, Finland has emerged as one of the top military spenders in the alliance, spending about 2% of GDP. In 2022, only the US, 3.5% of GDP, Poland, 2.4%, Estonia, 2.3%, and the UK, 2.1%, spent more on defense per capita than Finland. Despite NATO's spending goal of 2%, many nations fall well below this target. For instance, Finland's neighbor Norway had a spending level of just 1.55%. Its neighbor Sweden, with which it filed a joint NATO bid only to part ways later on, has pledged to reach the bloc's target of military spending as soon as possible, whereas Denmark seeks to reach NATO's target within a decade, by 2033. Meanwhile, global military expenditure rose to a record high last year amid the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, which spurred European nations and, broadly, the West, into reaching spending levels unseen since the Cold War. European military spending alone shot up 13% last year. According to an estimate by researchers from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, last year's total global military spending rose by 3.7% in real terms to $2.24 trillion. SIPRI stressed that the hike rests on multi-year plans to boost spending from several governments, which is why it is reasonable to expect military expenditure in Central and Western Europe to keep rising in the years to come. Australia's defence review shows its readiness to side with US in possible conflict with China. Implementing all the tasks outlined in Australia's defence review is a challenge that will take plenty of time, Professor Joe Siracusa, U.S. political expert and Dean of Global Futures at Curtin University, said to the media. Australia has rolled out its new Defence Strategic Review, billed by the government as the most significant update of its military planning in nearly 40 years. The document outlined at least 6 priority areas for immediate action, including the development of Australia's nuclear-powered submarine capability and longer-range strike capacity, speeding up the integration of new technologies into the military, defence workforce retention and recruitment, plus improving strategic cooperation between Canberra and its key partners in the Indo-Pacific. These are major changes which are going to take a great deal of effort to realise, because they have neither the capability to produce the boats right now or the ability to manufacture the missiles unless they buy them off the shelf from the Americans, Siracusa said, referring to nuclear-powered submarines. The expert argued that the review does 2 things, shows that Australia's Labor Party is changing the battle plan for the country, and number 2, that it's serious about funding it. It's been very hard to get this kind of money up in Australia because Australians don't like to pay a lot of money for defence. And so this is a major decision. And once again, it's a decision taken by a government on a proposal that will take years to come to fruition, when and if it does. This defence plan is sort of a promissory note, Siracusa claimed. Joseph Camilleri, Emeritus Professor at La Trobe University in Melbourne and one of Australia's leading international relations scholars, in turn, told Sputnik that the goal of the country's new defence review is to equip Australian military forces to support the US in any future military confrontation with China. According to him, the Australian government looks to demonstrate that it remains a close ally of the United States and that it will side with it in any future conflict with China. Camilleri was echoed by Scott Burkhill, Honorary Fellow in International Relations at Deakin University and author of The National Interest in International Relations Theory and Misunderstanding International Relations. He recalled that the review stipulates a shift in Australian defence policy towards a closer alignment with the US military in the Asia-Pacific outlined under the AUKUS arrangements, which he said is an incremental rather than a revolutionary change. The emphasis on greater self-reliance is welcome and sensible. But the purchase of nuclear-powered submarines and the interchangeability foreshadowed under the AUKUS procurements suggest Australia is heading in the opposite direction, to an even closer alignment with US maritime interests in the region, Burkhill pointed out. He said that Canberra deciding to side with Washington is a development that will not be lost on the other countries of the region, Australia's neighbours, who will again question the sincerity of Australia's desire to more fully integrate with the Asia-Pacific.